Does God grade on the curve? Does he? Does God grade on the curve? Lots of people are depending on that, on God doing that, but I can tell you, that's a dangerous gamble. Many universities grade that way. The curve is the bell curve. It's shaped like a bell. And over on one side of that bell curve are the A students, maybe 10 or 20% of the class. And on the other side are the D's and F's, maybe another 10 or 20%. In the middle, 60 to 80% of the class peaks at the B, C range. A prof distributes the grades along that curve. Why? Well, the idea is that this represents the average class's grasp of a subject, and it minimizes differences between professors and examinations. So a student passes the class simply by doing better than the worst students. It's sort of like you don't have to outrun a hungry lion. You only have to outrun the slowest person in your group. Grading on the curve is the same as that. It's all relative. There's no absolute standard in it. See, I remember my second-year French final examination. I didn't know French when I took that exam. However, the prof had created an exam that native Parisians would have failed. I scored 45, not out of 100, out of 150. That really gave me a grade of 30. The exam was way too difficult. So instead of failing most of the class, the prof graded on the curve. And I passed. Didn't know French. Guessed at my answers. I couldn't speak any French, would have failed an oral exam, but guessed better than half the class did. I got a passing grade, a grade that I didn't deserve. Now, don't count on that happening with God. You'll get the grade you do deserve. If you're trying to get right with God on your own, it won't happen. It doesn't work that way. Does God grade on the curve and we get into heaven because we did better than some of our peers? No. Most people are counting on the idea that if we do good enough, well, good enough as self-defined, then God will overlook the bad stuff, grade on the curve, and let us into heaven. But there's two problems with that. First, we don't get to define right and wrong. And second, God's the judge. He uses his standard, not ours. God determines what is a passing grade. He's the one who marks our life exam. Recently, a millennial told me that my generation was narrow-minded. I told him that we were actually more alike than he might have thought. I explained that many of my peers believed that something was true if enough people believed it was true, and that his generation believed something was true. The only difference was if it's a smaller group that believed it was. Maybe sometimes just him and his peers, or sometimes just him. He agreed with that description of his generation. And he agreed that if a small group could decide what was true and good, then that would certainly apply to a bigger group. He was very satisfied with that view, that worldview of defining good and evil. If enough people, a small or big group, believed something was good, then it must be good. That's what he believed. But I told him of my standing in one of Hitler's gas chambers in Poland, in Auschwitz, standing in front of the ovens, and seeing a bullet-riddled execution wall. I described some of the other relics of Hitler's purging those he thought were undesirable, a purging that many, many Germans agreed with. That millennial realized what he was saying, that since so many Germans agreed with Hitler that Hitler's genocide was good, that's wrong. He realized it. That's when he saw his view of good and evil collapse. That realization left him, the millennial, with that deer-caught-in-the-headlights look on his face. You see, we need an absolute standard of right and wrong. We need a standard that is based on absolute truth, not some system based on the opinions of man. We need one that outlasts the morals of today. We need that. And actually, we have that from God. God's standard of right and wrong, of good and evil, is given to us in the Bible. Some people don't like the details of that, but I can tell you, it has stood the test of time. When social norms are out of step with the Bible, It's not the Bible that's wrong. Living life God's way works. It has for centuries. And I've counseled quite a few people who have messed up their lives. But I have never had to counsel anyone who messed up their life by doing life God's way. No one ever regrets following God's high road. God's standard of right and wrong works. It's actually best for us. But since none of us can live up to that standard, will God grade us on the curve? Will he grade us on the curve? The Bible's answer to that question is an emphatic no. But we could ask, couldn't we get close enough to make it, if even by the smallest margin? Well, let's look at that realistically. Our margins just aren't that small. Just to name a few of the wrong things we do, there's lying, lusting, stealing, no matter what the value is, hypocritical judging, pride, and disobeying civil authorities. Like what? Well, how about speeding? Ever gotten a speeding ticket? Or not gotten a ticket but sped anyway? And those are just a few of the horizontal sins. What about the vertical sins, such as ignoring God or relegating him to some second or third place in our lives? To be truthful, if you're guilty of just 3 of those horizontal or vertical sins in one day, you're having a good day. So do the math. 3 sins a day for 20 years? That adds up to almost 22,000 sins. Not very close to getting 100 on your exam, is it? You see, we all fall way short. That's what Romans 3:23 states. For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. That's just reality. And if we're trying hard to improve, trying to do better, all we're actually doing is making our record get worse at a slower rate. Okay, we've all done wrong stuff. But is there some threshold, some number of sins that if we cross, we'll get condemned by God? Is there that threshold, some number? Actually, the Bible gives us an exact number. James 2:10 states it. Here it is. For whoever keeps the whole law and yet stumbles in just one point, he has become guilty of all. You see, there are 2 grades possible, and only 2, 0 or 100. There's no grades in between. One sin gives us a 0 on our life exam. By our own efforts, you and I have scored a 0. However, Jesus took that exam in our place. Our failure is sure, but his substitution is surely available to us. But it's not ours unless we come to him on his terms in true repentance and belief. Here's an example. Imagine a life exam record book on some shelf in heaven. It's your book. Your name's on the cover. And every time you do something wrong, some accountant angel puts a check mark in your book. I can tell you this, my book's really marked up. Pages dog-eared, some pages actually falling out, covers all worn and threadbare, real mess. And so is yours. You and I don't even come close. Page after page is filled with check marks. But there's another book on that shelf. The name on its cover is Jesus Christ. Open that book, his book, and you'll see only clean pages. You see, Jesus never sinned. Now, imagine the moment when you believe in him. That accountant angel takes both books down from the shelf and swaps the covers. All your check marks are now in his book, and all of his clean pages are in yours. Then when God looks at your life exam, you pass. You get a perfect score. Why? Because it's his perfect score. On your own, you can't be perfect. You don't get a passing grade. You get a 0 on your own. You fail, just like I do. But the perfect one passed that exam for you and for me. His perfect score isn't yours until you pull the trigger on believing. So my encouragement to you is this. Believe. Believe today. Don't put it off. Follow the 911 God link at the bottom of the Just a Question homepage. That'll take you to a video where I'll walk you through how to get those covers swapped. Do it now. I beg you, do it now. I'm John Morris. I'll see you on that 911 God video or on the next Just a Question.